Welcome back to Framework and to our ongoing coverage of The Shield, basically the run of the aughts corrupt police drama from television starring, what's his name? Michael Chiklis. You all know this. If you're listening to this.
It's pronounced Walton Goggins.
This is the season of the Goggins where he really it's all Goggins all the time.
He takes his own, he comes into his own this season, gets his own sort of storyline. I mean, I guess he had some independent scenes in prior seasons, but he is operating on his own and carrying more of the show than ever.
He's definitely now co-lead. Like, there's no question about it. They're relying heavily on Goggins for their central narrative arc. And all the better for it. My God, what a performance. But first off, I am John, one of the hosts of Framework. With me for the first time on our Shield coverage is Al. Welcome back to welcome to the Shield coverage, Al.
I'm dropping in midstream. I'm definitely the Steve Billings of this podcast. Just going to pretend I was always around.
And of course, Chris Prentice, my fellow journeyer on this Shield quest from the start.
Hello. It's good to be back. I appreciate it. Looking forward to talking over this season. It's just as mentioned, it's a favorite of mine just because it's the first of Billings.
Okay, maybe it's too early to do like overall season rankings, but where did you guys have this going on? Was this a favorite? I've had heard that this was ranked low amongst the fan base, at least when it first came out.
I saw something along those lines. This is the season that got me watching the show. I think I mentioned this before, just seeing that it had big guest stars. I was like, oh, I guess I'll finally give that a shot, kind of deal. I believe that up until this point, this is the best season of the show. This is better than 1, 2, or 3. I think this is kind of the show crystallizing what it can really be. I think I got to revisit the next few seasons, but my memory is that those are going to be hard to top. And, I think 5 is probably the most incredible, but I don't know for sure. We got to rewatch those, but yeah, this one is this is a new high water mark when it airs in 2005.
There's a couple of things there. One is the big guest star thing. This is the Glenn Close season, as well as being the Anthony Anderson season, and also the Michael Pena season. That is something that I'm sure helped it at the time get some more eyeballs on it, because this is you gotta cast your way back here. We're not quite in the Reagan era, but we are way back in history when a movie star of Glenn Close's caliber deigning to do a cable drama was like a big deal, a big get for them.
Yeah.
But I think in hindsight, once the whole series is over, the fact that they can't lock down Glenn Close for the rest of the series run or anything, and that some of these characters are kind of one-off and confined to the season, and it separates this from the final run, the 5, 6, 7 run, which is a very continuous thing to one of, if not the best endings that a long-running drama series has ever had, and feels very much of a piece. And that separates this season from that sort of legend-making run, and probably lowers it in people's estimation more generally, in hindsight.
Yeah, it's not for me. It's on the lower end of the seasons. Like, always when you're talking about this, I'll throw in the caveat that it's still great, still amazing. But I always kind of put 3 and 4 as kind of they're the lower rung seasons. I love it, can watch it at any time and enjoy it, but it's 5, 6, 7, that's kind of their own thing, because it's just a total roller coaster once we get into 5. And I don't know, I for whatever reason, I just kind of I feel like 1 and 2 are just a little more gritty because it's new and they're kind of trying things out, and I sort of enjoy all that. And 4, I mean, they kind of know what the show is in season 4, as they should. I mean, it's one thing that I thought was surprising is I always kind of figured that like Glenn Close kind of signed on because, this is kind of the upstart hot show that everyone's talking. There's a lot of buzz about it. It's this gritty, and that she, that's why she would have signed on. And I'm sure that's probably how she felt. But I guess I also read that the other main reason she was brought in was because season 3 did like real bad in the ratings, and there was like some cancellation talk after season 3, and so they kind of had to bring in somebody to kind of up the star wattage a little bit and to get some more eyeballs on it.
Yeah, it worked for me, I guess.
Yeah.
If that's what they needed to do, I'd say well worth it. I mean, she's pretty good on the show.
Oh yeah,
I think season 3 might have suffered from being the longest season. It's the only one that went long.
There's extraneous episodes in that, which is not usually what you see on the Shield.
Yeah, and that at the time, we were still in a transition period. We're now, especially for a sort of prestige type, highfalutin drama on cable with high production values, 10 episodes, 12 episodes is more of a norm. But this is still a time when 22 and 24 episode seasons were very much more common. And it turns out the Shield, especially among antihero dramas, cable dramas generally, uniquely better suited to shorter season run times than longer ones. And I think you feel that, season 3 and season 4 both are a little odd in that they seem to kind of climax and then have 2 more episodes.
Yeah. That definitely happens a little in this season. I would say, I think that what it is that this show can do a standalone episode, but it's not well served by those, because everything informs what has happened before in such an appealing way. You would think as a cop show, they would be able to do just, like a Claudette and Dutch rapist of the week story. No problem. But
they're doing those constantly, aren't they?
Well, yes, but I mean, even then,
they stretch them out. I mean, they do a lot of them over many episodes. The whole Cuddler Rapist. I mean, that was multi episodes. Yeah.
More as the seasons go on. That's true. But there's not really a standalone episode of the Shield, but because you have the strike team and you have Dutch and Claudette or Billings at times, and then you have Danny and Julian, there's still cases of the week constantly.
Right.
They're dealing with.
Yes.
But you're right. They're not fully standalone episodes. They should.
You can do like a real quick story about a guy trying to buy Lucy cigarettes in a bodega, gets enraged and hits a guy, and that's a story for a week because you can kind of find themes that reverberate with other stories going on and reinforce or inform them in some way, and that's cool. That's a good use of Claudette and Dutch, when they're not part of the main story of the week, that sort of thing. And the Shield does that all the time, but when you see like an episode like they've upset the Chinese gangs in the neighborhood that pops its head up for 1 week and then is gone forever and never mentioned again, stuff like that, that's kind of the Shield at its least impactful, I would say. It is the accumulated weight of everything that informs everything that happens, and it's part of what makes this show special. That said, season 4 is probably the season that works best in isolation. Like, you could kind of just pick this season up, watch it start to finish, and not be terribly lost. It tells a kind of a complete story.
Yeah.
And I do find that somewhat good. It's not really the mode Shield works in most of the time, but it's not bad to have a big bad. It's not bad to have a season-long narrative that gets fully articulated in one go.
No,
and,
especially not if the big bad
come back.
The big bad has a performance like Anthony Anderson's in this, which we'll have to talk about a little more later. But right now I want to stick on this sort of the thing about season 4 standing out from the rest of the seasons and the structure of that. Because, I mean, if we're talking about quality, for me, like, there are tiers of the Shield where I think 5 and 7 stand over all the rest. And then I think 1 and 6 are kind of at the bottom. 6 kind of like is helped by being swept up between 5 and 7 and being the connective tissue between the high points of the show. But is also,
it's just
there was a writer's strike that
really
cut it in half. Yeah,
right.
It got cut off abruptly because of a writer's strike. Its faults are not entirely its fault in a way, but it's still on its own. I think it ranks at the bottom with probably season 1 for me. And 2 and 3, I think
I
are
don't
pretty
remember
good.
much of 6. I'm going to be interested to come back to that because it's just such a propulsive final act of this story. So,
But my
I'm
point is,
curious.
season 4 to me sits in its own tier of quality, unique from the other. Like 1, 2, 3, and 6 are kind of like the lesser shield to me, and 5 and 7 are the peaks of it, and then 4 is in the middle there, and it's closer to the top than it is to the lower end. But it is partially because it's so easy to isolate that this is a season that has this character and this character and this character that aren't any of the others, and because it's the one season that is doing something so different as far as the strike team is disbanded. And it's about them coming back together instead of falling apart as everything else always is.
Yeah.
But the weird thing about this season is that it is such a soft reboot of the show. It starts out with like it's kind of resetting everything. As what if the strike team is no more. Shane is more of an antagonist. Vic is actually and Ronnie. We always forget about Ronnie, of course. Everybody does, but they're actually kind of trying to fly straighter than ever before.
This is the Vic is basically a good guy season.
Yeah, Vic is the most sensible person this whole season. He's really grounded this season. You know, compared to any other ones, Vic is like a straight arrow.
For Vic, he certainly is. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a soft reboot in the sense that I think that, like, hey, you want to see Glenn Close? You're not going to be lost. You know, jump right in. I think they're doing that a little bit, at least. Obviously, everything is informed by what's come before on this show, but you could start with season 4, episode 1, and not feel lost. You'd be like, okay, it's a cop show. I understand. These relationships are clear right away. I kind of get, what Claudette and Dutch's deal is, how they relate to the other parts of the, you get it. And whether that's conscious or not, I imagine it was. It does kind of isolate this one. Yeah.
But I'm saying, in addition to just the dealing with the Glenn Close character, or whoever, and having new people, audience members understand what's going on, that's one thing. But what I'm saying is this is resetting things in a different way. Even looking at it in the totality of the 7-season run, it is sort of resetting the corruption level of the Spike team. To like maybe because obviously the thing is the show's even most famous for. I mean, it's most famous for its pilot and its finale, and the pilot's famous for pushing the heroes so far into irredeemability with that final twist. And in a way, they have to then spend a lot of the first season walking back how much of a villain he is, and that even the first 3 seasons of the show are all sort of the first act. I mean, that's another way of looking at this. If you look at the 7-season run as a 3-act structure, then it feels to me like it's a weirdly structured thing where seasons 1 through 3 feel like the first act to me, and seasons 5 through 7 are kind of the third act, and second act's usually the long part. It's usually as big as the first and third put together in a traditional like movie structure. But in this case, it feels like there's 3 seasons of Act 1, 3 seasons of Act 3, and 1 season of Act 2. I guess you could put 4 and 5 together as part of Act 2 if you wanted to.
You could call 3 and 4 like the, Act 2. You could break it down in a number of ways. It does have a 3-act structure, though, like from a bird's eye view. But this is definitely the middle. This is literally and sort of just thematically the middle part of the story. This is life as usual, kind of. Obviously, there are consequences for our guest stars who have 1-season contracts for the most part, but no one else is really going to move their position much beyond just sort of shuffling chairs on the deck. Everyone's kind of in their groove and getting back to a new normal.
What could make this the weakest episode or season of the series is that, and that like I said, it's sort of resetting. Season 3 pushed everything so far, and it blew up the strike team, and now we have to. There's a way this could be a season of resetting Vic into a more likable mode, a more sustainable long-term procedural mode. We can watch this guy be an anti-hero, more in the mold of, I forget what, I don't know, Christopher Maloney on SVU or whatever. His character's name is Stabler, I believe his name is. Anyway, and we're also spending a whole season reforming the team and getting them back to the point where they're buddies again after it seemed like that would be impossible coming out of season 3. And
the redemption of Shane Vendrell in this season is something I couldn't believe they were able to pull off because, he seems to transgress to a point where it's just like, well, we're not getting him back.
Right.
This is, he can't return after all this, but they find a way. And I think that's great because it kind of shows the strike team that there's always a way when that's not the case, as it turns out. Kind of hubris builders.
I did have a tough time buying that Lem would be as open to accepting Shane, given everything that went down with Angie and her being murdered. That always kind of didn't seem like, because they, by the end of the season, they're all having drinks, everything's copacetic, and I don't know. I always felt like there should have been a little more of a rift still between Shane and Lem.
Well, we're going to get that eventually. And
eventually,
right.
Yeah. But I mean, just by the end of the season, I felt like it shouldn't have been quite as everything's jolly as it was at the end of the season.
But I think they need that. That it's the last time anyone's ever happy.
Yeah, and it's exaggerated. They're bonhomie together when they're sitting they're back in the car together, laughing too hard at lame jokes about prostitutes and whatnot.
That stuck out to me too.
That is there because we know there's this sort of Damocles hanging over them that Lem IAD has already busted Lem basically, and they don't know that. And he's in there, and that is kind of what I was going to say is that this could, when you look at the season in isolation, it could be the worst season of the series because it's all just kind of walking back what they've done previously and taking things to a less challenging, less, easier, more sustainable place of the strike team all being friends again. And we get to watch them have their adventures. And even ending this season, we don't really have a sense like, okay, there was a brick of heroin and they've got that they know Lem took. But this really isn't the first time IAD has been on their ass. It's not really the first time that they've known drugs, like missing drugs, have been an issue. Like it's not clear at the end of the season to me that like, oh, this is the beginning of the end. They can't possibly wiggle out of this one because they've wiggled out so much. But having seen all 7 seasons and knowing that really does that brick of heroin and that IAD guy is the beginning of the end for them. It kind of salvages any of that feeling. And now this really does feel like an essential part of that story. And these, we haven't met Kavanaugh yet, but we just saw, the thing that births him into this story. And we knowing that Lem actually does go down for this totally changes how I was viewing it versus the first time around.
Yeah, it's kind of great to rewatch this season and run up against that at the end. And I even love the way it's presented to Glenn Close after she's been fired, and she's just like, "This is clearly next season's business, guys." We'll talk about this later. Yeah,
they even have the undercover officer that she was working with at the very end, and they even show him at the very end of the season.
Yeah, he goes
when
into
they're
the
all
bar.
drinking in the bar, and then we never see that guy again. I guess once Forrest Whitaker signs on, I don't know why they couldn't have had both that guy come back, but it's like as soon as they get Forrest Whitaker, it's like, oh, sorry, sir, we're moving on.
He's the herald of Whitaker. He's the Silver Surfer to Whitaker's Galactus.
Yeah,
and that's the thing you never like. Okay, here's another thing that I was thinking about a lot during this. A little mental game I like to play with big TV shows is like, all right, if you had like another crack at this, at knowing where everything's going, if you're writing it in book form or whatever, and you get to do another draft, how would you like iron out the wrinkles of this and like make this show into its perfected form? Which obviously the runners can't do when they don't know how long it's going to run and they're throwing everything together on the fly. People's schedules are what they are. And I've done that, like the most a complete version I've done of this is I've done a complete beat for beat thing of the last half of Game of Thrones that fixes that entirely, and nobody's mad at that show ever again. But a lot of the times with things, The Sopranos or whatever, it's just a lot of like, well, it would be nice to have introduced this character earlier in the run when they become so vital to the back half. And that's what a lot of it is here. Would it have been nice to have Billings around earlier? Sure. Most of the Shield's problems for me are with integrating these big guest stars, and just it would have been nice to have had, Glenn Rawling mentioned earlier in the run, have her come back a little more like Anthony Anderson, that she could pop up again in a different role. I guess in season 6, Franca Potente's abrupt exit is probably the thing that's the most jarring. But there's, I guess, the two things that are biggest. Well, one, I would prefer a better exit for Michael Pena from this season.
Yeah,
I
don't know how you guys felt about
that. I mean, he's Michael Pena and he's great, but I do like that he's just like, nah, fuck you guys, I'm out.
I always thought when this season was originally going on, I always thought that eventually Michael Pena Army was going to get out of hand. He was going to become too much of a liability, and then Shane was going to have to kill him. And, then it would have been, kind of almost repeating what we saw in the first season, only with Shane being the one who killed the cop. That's where I thought that was going. But yeah, he just kind of disappears, and not, to me, it was not the most satisfying exit for that character.
No, it does feel like he's set up to be, okay, let's introduce this guy as a sort of the fifth member strike team. Is that an idea they'd flirt with constantly from Tavon through, what's his name, Hyatt? He
was the leader.
Possibly give a shit. Yeah, guy. And it always seems like, well, you do that so that it gives you somebody that you could kill off and not fuck up the core of the strike team that, the series regulars. And that's never actually they never actually do go that route with it, which I kind of like overall. But that's definitely how the first time through you think Army is okay. This is somebody
expendable
that they can, expendable. And you're right. That it feels like maybe it's going that way with him and Shane, and it's just so much easier to think better on this season in hindsight, because like what you just laid out would be a weaker version of what they'll go through in season 5 and what Shane will actually do. There. And they just, I don't know. I mean, being coy as if there's somebody watching it for the first time now. I don't want to spoil season 5.
Don't spoil 5.
Yeah.
But the thing is that season 5 follows through on so many threats that have been building for 4 seasons now that it retroactively makes the seasons that are building up those threats better in my mind.
Well, it's crazy that as violent and as, gritty and just awful stuff that happens on this show, that through 4 seasons, the 9 kind of principal characters that we're introduced to in season 1, they all make it through season 4. They never take any one of them out in the first 4 seasons, which, I mean, looking back is kind of miraculous. I mean, eventually that ends in season 5, but it's just kind of wild that they went this long without killing one of the major characters off.
Yeah, going into the series finale, this show has killed off 1 series regular character, which is kind of amazing when you think of how violent this show is in your memory.
Sure,
surprising. I had a thought about that actually, which is much is made of the deaths of Carl and Scooby this season. Mm-hmm. A couple policemen in the barn that, well, we have practically no relationship with. We see Scooby kill a dog at the beginning of the season. That's all we really know about him. And then these deaths are centrally important for the last 5 episodes of the season. They are huge motivating forces that basically change everyone's general deal and what they're after for the rest of the show. We don't know these guys. Would it have been better if that was Danny and Julian? Their stories are kind of done, right? I mean, there's more Danny. I don't necessarily want to get rid of her, but
Julian.
Yeah.
Especially in hindsight, knowing what's going on with the actor.
Oh, yeah. He should have been killed off in the first season.
Should have been
Julian. Of course, yes. I've lost my patience with him, by the way. The actor and the character. I'm just like, stop writing this guy, please. Yeah.
Well, they just then you definitely must love this season, because he gets pretty much nothing. I mean, he gets his big scene is hassling a guy over bootleg DVDs. That's like his big moment of the season.
It's all his stuff this season. It's wishy-washy bullshit, man. I can't like.
Well, he's the only one kind of standing that's opposing the seizure program, which we should talk about. The seizure program,
badly and impotently. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. But that feels like, of course. I mean, that feels like one of the more realistic elements of The Shield, which is not a very realistic show generally. But of course, the only opposition within the police force to this program is bad and impotent and half-assed.
And that's Julian for you. doesn't show him to much strong effect. I thought, and yeah, I feel like most of the things they come up with him to do, and it's just like it seems like make work. It seems like we could really be with anybody else. We could Danny and Julian at this point. It feels like they bring back Rebecca Pigeon for just for nothing, for just to do Danny and Julian busy work. Yeah.
But I think that's also kind of the side effect of adding Glenn Close is now you've got, you're giving her a ton to do. You're giving Anthony Anderson a ton to do. Well, that's going to eat away at Danny and Julian. Even Dutch and Claudette, they're kind of pushed aside a bit this season, at least compared to the other ones. To me, they're sort of, we do get to see Dutch and Billings fight, so that was awesome. But
Dutch has
for the most part,
Dutch has a good season.
I don't know. I felt like they're both kind of pushed aside for this season. Dutch, that was kind of the sense I got.
Dutch has conflict with Billings, and he's dating Mackie's ex-wife, and he's always got a serial killer and a rapist on deck.
And he's hungry like a wolf.
He is.
That's true.
But you're right about just what you said. Certainly applies to Danny and Julian, and probably Claudette too.
Well, Claudette is sort of on the downswing, I think, after getting just like insulted and humiliated last season. Her big characterization this season is a lot of eye rolling. Sort of being passive and pissed off and bitter, which makes sense for her character. She's still great. She's still CCH Pounder. She has her "It's Always Sunny" quote.
No more decoy squad.
Mm-hmm. The Dennis impersonation.
Running for the DA.
Yeah, how many more errands you got us running for the DA? Yeah, which I'm such a big fan of that scene from It's Always Sunny, and it's such a good impersonation that the entire Dutch Claudette subplot for this season is like a build up to that line for me. It's just like, oh, the DA is mad, and Dutch is like, I wonder if there was something I could do to help with the DA, and just like every scene is getting ready for that line.
That's more than the brick of heroin. That's the thing your shoe you're waiting to drop.
Yeah. Say the line, Claudette. Yeah.
No, okay. I guess I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth about this because on the one hand, I was saying that one of the issues with this season is that the guest stars take up too much air, and in the grand scope of the whole portrait, they're not as important. But also, when you lay it out the way that Chris did, it feels like a fair trade to give Glenn Close and Anthony Anderson and Michael Pena time to act in a trade-off for Danny and Julian and even Claudette. Like, Claudette's the only one that hurts at all.
But it makes sense for her character as well to have a less involved season. And Glenn Close, Anthony Anderson, Michael Pena. I'm really surprised how well Glenn Close fits into the tapestry of this show. You would not think that this 90-pound middle-aged woman would be able to pull off this character, the police chief of the hardest district in Los Angeles. And, with it's just pure star presence, I guess. She does. Yeah,
and you wouldn't accept that Glenn Close is sort of royalty in the cinema world. She's an Oscar winner. She's not Meryl Streep, but she was a contemporary of Meryl Streep and all that. Like,
well, she's coming off playing like Cruella DeVille at this point. She's like a movie star, and it's not distracting after the first couple episodes. She becomes Monica Rowling.
Early on, I do admit, I think there's a couple times where she's given like quote unquote shield dialogue, and she doesn't quite sell it. She'll be like, "Spook Street soldiers." And we are interested in an OG named Antoine Mitchell.
Well, you would never cast Glenn Close in this role if she wasn't Glenn Close. Like,
no, she is good.
Yeah,
but it's just, but there were a couple times early on where it's kind of like it just doesn't. Maybe it's also because she's this new character that's kind of brought into the fold, and it just doesn't. She doesn't quite sell it immediately, but over the course of the season, she does, and to me, I think she fits in just fine.
I mean, I could even say that is part of the character, is that she doesn't quite fit in at first. You know, everyone's just like, oh, who the fuck are you? Kind of walking into this.
And, and
she
has to bring the barn to her a
bathroom?
bit.
Yeah.
But I would say that my knock on Glenn Close is not that she doesn't fit the show enough, but just that this was kind of clearly designed to be the Glenn Close season. But to me, it's the Anthony Anderson season, and that's the surprise. Not so much that Hollywood royalty Glenn Close couldn't pull off a police captain. It's that Anthony Anderson coming off of like Kangaroo Jack and Me, Myself, and Irene delivers this incredible, big bad performance that stuck with me for 15 years before I rewatched this.
I was surprised in revisiting it that he doesn't have more to do, honestly. Like his shadow loomed so heavily over this season that I kind of remember him being like way more present.
Well,
I thought he had like 5 more scenes, like the one where he kills that girl. You
hear his name so much. That is, if I had one
tweet
it's like, we don't need to say the name Antoine Mitchell on everybody's lips for 8 straight episodes. That's the thing that just happens from time to time, and to me, it's a sign. I think if you're probably in a writer's room, you should take note of like maybe we're over plotting this. Another big offender is Justified. Season 4 is also season 4 of a good crime show. Very good season of television overall, but I got real sick of hearing people just say the name Drew Thompson over and over again and over again and over again and over again for 12 episodes.
Well, at least Antoine Mitchell is like a significant and important character in the cosmology of the show.
Yeah.
Like,
it is.
Yeah.
He becomes,
and I remembered that name for 15 years.
Right. Even after he is, somewhat disposed of by the events of season 4, he is a presence. He returns to the show a couple times, but he is, his legacy looms. Like he is what's waiting for him if they fuck up forever after this, and that's that's great use
of the character, even without being able to put the actor on screen. And in terms of not putting the actor on screen as much, that's I think one of the challenges of the Shield. Sorry, Chris, but this is the Shield is a show. I think that we kind of think of it in hindsight as having big bads, season villains, and that's not so much true. They were like season 2 had Armadillo, but even he was dispatched off even earlier than I think episode 10. Yeah. And season 3 has Margos, I guess, but only for the last 2 episodes after the season kind of climaxed. This one's got it for real. I guess season 5, the big bad is Kavanaugh.
Kavanaugh's a big
even
bad.
That's weird.
Technically. He's like an anti-villain. Yeah.
And then there's some guy in season 7, I think I remember the name Pezuela getting thrown out a lot, but I don't think he's even the final target that Vic's wheeling and dealing for. The Shield would more do this thing where, like with the finale here, where all of a sudden we're going to talk about this guy Bonilla, and he's the biggest fish on DEA and FBI's radar for years. We're only hearing about him for one episode, and the strike team can track him down in an afternoon. But fine,
sort of an imbecile old man too when they find him. Yeah, okay. Cool.
But I think part of the reason why the Shield didn't have it seems like a good fit to have the crime lord of the season that they're chasing down and is threatening them constantly. But the Shield had a harder time actually doing that in ways because it follows the perspective of the cops so closely that it's not giving us just scenes with Anthony Anderson and his underlings. We are only seeing him when Antoine is interacting with Shane or Vic or Rowling. But it's not like The Wire or, even like the term big bad, I think came from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And that's the type of show that will do scenes just among the villains amongst themselves. And you never get that with the Shield, unless you count the strike team as the villains, which in the later seasons, I think you can.
Absolutely. They are self-contained within their heroes and villains are, all in the barn. They're all right there in the same room, the whole show, basically. They are working towards, the same temporary goals. They just don't necessarily know they are allied against or arrayed against each other, or in what configuration. Like, I don't know, you could make the argument that Acevedo is as much of a villain as anyone this season.
I like what they did with Acevedo this season. I thought I was kind of worried that once he got on the council that they would have like nothing for him, but I don't know. I thought
no,
especially especially
they've got some stuff for him.
No, they had a lot for him. I was surprised watching this season again. I mean, just his rage when he sees the other dude visiting the prostitute. Oh man, I think that's a great Aceveda moment right there.
Yeah, and it should be bad stuff. I feel like looking at from way above, like because the Shield never really excels with the going home with the cops storylines. That's generally not what you remember being good about the show. And also, like the opposite of what I was saying earlier about how a lot of times when you're trying to iron out the perfect version of the show in hindsight, it's introducing people and involving them earlier on. It would look to me from at a glance like one of the big problems with the Shield is keeping Aceveda around for several seasons after the character had organically left the barn and would not be involved anymore. At least through this season, he seems to be involved the right amount in ways that make perfect sense to me.
If memory serves, he does step back a little after this.
I remember him being a lot in the last season, though.
He's in the last season. He's in a lot, but yeah, the season 5 is his step back season. But I think this season that they do find a way to shoehorn him into like because he's got his police auxiliary powers, so that's why he's the one who finds Carl and Scooby. So he's they were kind of shoehorn him into some actual police work that way, and then they have all the stuff with the prostitute that he's seeing. So I was glad that. I don't think he was a victim of Glenn Close being added. I think he still had plenty of stuff to work with, which I think
they had
was
some
kind
ideas.
of no, for sure, yeah. and like I think I've said before, just doing this rewatch, I mean, he's kind of the character that has really just jumped out at me the most. I mean, I feel like I didn't appreciate him as much when the show was originally going on, and I'm just totally into his performance watching it again.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of remembered a lot of this stuff, like with the prostitute that he's spending a bunch of time with, as being a bit of an anchor on the show, like something I wasn't too into, and just seemed like, well, do we really need all this? Can we get back to Antoine Mitchell and the rest? And no, it's all good. He's really good in those scenes. It's not necessarily stuff that I needed the show to do, but it works, and it's certainly creepy, and yeah, I think just Benito Martinez selling it is a huge part of why I'm cool with it now.
Oh, for sure.
He's I don't know. I mean, I got him probably right under Chiklis and Goggins in my power rankings. I would have to say. I don't know. It's tough.
Over Pounder?
I mean, CCH Pounder.
Pounder
is right there.
Yeah,
right there.
I gotta put Pounder in above there.
Well, it was. I think this is her least season. I would say that, but overall, probably, yeah.
Sidebar. Unfortunate actor name, I guess, for CCH Pounder, because for me, I have a personal thing where I used to work at like a diner when I was before I saw this show, and you'd scribble down an order, and CCH was a notation for cheddar cheeseburger. So it always shows up to me on screen as cheddar cheese quarter pounder. And I still cannot shake that association 20 years later. End of sidebar.
Yeah, that's always the danger of using your initials. Like I always see J.K. Simmons' name as just Kiddin Simmons.
That's true. Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
And you know what? He is a good comedic actor. So sometimes he is just kidding around.
Well, I introduced to him in Oz where he was not kidding around very often.
Oh, he was kidding around menacingly. And like, no, I really am going to put that tattoo on your ass, though. Yeah, that.
He could have been on the Shield. God, he would have fit right into this
for
world.
Sure.
Oh, I just think he had done 7 seasons of Oz already.
Oh yeah, he was doing Oz. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think they probably didn't want to have overlap between those two because
the
Shield didn't want to like cite their sources that much.
Might have been fun to have Vernon Schillinger show up in Farmington for some reason, though. Like Detective Munch or whatever. That would have been cool.
An actual crossover might have been cool. But yeah. I mean, you can't do that because at the time, this is before, Sony and Disney are doing deals and whatnot. Right. Those are... Oz is part of the HBO cinematic universe, and The Shield is very much conscious, I think, of trying to live outside of the shadow of The Sopranos during its run. So it doesn't want to...
And The Wire,
at all.
maybe. This is the first season that I was like,
yeah.
actually, this is kind of like The Wire.
This is it's attempting to be The Wire, and you wouldn't cite it as
the closest. Yeah.
Yeah, they're looking at actual ideas for crime enforcement, sort of poking at them and being like, well, what about asset forfeiture? Would that work? How would people feel about that? How do you balance that? And I mean, I think I'm not entirely sure how the show comes down. It just sort of presents it for you, and here's some pluses, here's some minuses. I don't know. I think making Julian the voice of the anti-forfeiture thing doesn't help.
No, not one.
You think it should have been Claudette?
Yes. Actually,
that would have made more sense. Yeah.
Well, but I think it's part of, I mean, I guess the generous reading of the show is that it is dramatizing and illustrating problems with law enforcement, and it's not offering up solutions. As if we just did this would work.
Well, I mean, it also has like monster corrupt cop supervillains at its center. You know,
that is the problem with. That's why I marked that as the generous interpretation, not one I buy 100%.
These are like Greek tragedy versions of corrupt cops. You know, these are not, these don't represent real people.
Yeah.
And
like
so when it gets into these waters, you know,
That's when I remember watching this, I didn't watch it as it aired exactly. I didn't until the 7th season. I finally was the first time I was caught up to watch it live. But you know, back in 2007 or 8, when I was watching these on disc, I recall things like, Claudette's stand against the DA and the asset forfeit seizure program being more interesting moral conundrums or philosophical conundrums, and like, how many eggs do you have to break to make this omelet and actually like get these gangs under control or whatever? And now it's very easy after 20 years of body cam footage to look at this stuff and be like, yeah, like they're talking about how exposing this wasn't the DA, it was actually the PD, the public defender, who was high, and overturning those convictions. Like, you're going to unleash all of these horrible criminals onto the street. And it's like, yeah, actually, I bet the batting average is not like, at the time, I kind of went with the show's presumption. It seemed to be that it's going to be like 90% violent criminals being released in order to let out a couple of people who like are probably kind of scummy anyway, because the Shield is not a big believer in innocence as a concept.
No, Farmington seems more monstrous and beastly than ever this season, I would have to say. You know,
den of filth.
Yeah.
But it's also like this asset seizure stuff. It's so obviously like, okay, I see the concept here and how maybe with a metric ton of oversight, you could do a version of this that kind of works. But like, it's so obviously corruptible in practice and quickly, and obviously like it's just going to be cops stealing from poor people. That's all this is going to be.
I mean, you don't trust these guys to be good with this program. You know, like, these cops, they're not going to. Doesn't he like put a bounty out on a car? Just like first guy who gets me a car, whatever. Like,
yeah, he gives Danny Laker tickets.
Just in world. That's our protagonist. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's hard to make the argument for the asset seizure program as presented here. Well, and they probably stack the deck for it pretty good.
Yeah, they do. I'd say the only way you can make the case for it is because you stack the deck with having Antoine Mitchells and Armadillos and other rapists hiding under every bush in Farmington. But yeah, I think. But this is the other thing is the show can't really bite off this wire-sized meal and do a really in-depth analysis of it because of its refusal to go home with either the criminals or the citizens of Farmington.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And that maybe that's one of the things that you would tweak over about this remaking it, is that you would have a more consistent like character base of Farmington citizens. You would have some Bubbles and Johnnies running around. You have Van Bro pop up a couple of times.
It would be more like The Wire then, but I don't know. I think that being so laser focused is part of the identity of this show. Yeah. And maybe that is what is required to get us into the headspace where we can even tolerate these characters, let alone root for them periodically.
Well, and again, to make the most generous argument for it I can, it's what makes the show effective at what it's dramatizing and about demonstrating police corruption is it's demonstrating how the police are not part of the communities that they are policing / oppressing. And that's part of what enables them to behave as corruptly and monstrously as they can, is that they don't view the citizens as, human beings, as people deserving of service and protection. They're just animals to be wrangled.
But to her credit, Monica moved into Farmington.
She does.
She does do that.
Yeah, but she's also the most in denial about the fact that she stole that house from an innocent poor person. I mean, he was guilt by association at most.
Mm-hmm. Weird stuff. I almost feel like the end of the season, like I almost feel like the way this season has to end is with her house getting seized in some means. But that doesn't. I don't know. That's probably a hat on a hat at that point. Too much.
Yeah, we are again, especially because by then we're past the climax so far that I don't really want another episode trying to set that up. Because the best episode of the season is episode 10, I believe. That's
best episode of the show up to this point, I think, is episode 10 of this season. Yeah,
the extra long one, which it's all Antoine in the box. I mean, part of that's great. It's because of we don't get to go home with Antoine ever, or see his, see him do his co-op meetings like Stringer Bell. It lets us spend more time with Antoine than we have the entire season, even though we've been chasing him, circling him, and talking about nothing but him. Now we actually. Anthony Anderson gets to flex there more
with Shane and Antoine in the room. There is whoa. I mean, that is just like, really oh my god! It's just like, yeah. It's just you just. I mean, I don't even know what even to say about it. I mean, it's like I love how at the end of it, after everything that Shane has said to him, that Antoine puts the cuffs back on himself. I think that's like just such a perfect way to cap that scene.
Yeah, he reads it. He reads what he's doing. It's great.
Yeah, he reads that he's trying to provoke him into going for his gun.
Shane, what a man!
And what a back and forth pair of scenes, because like you're saying a while back that you can't believe that they managed to rehabilitate the Shane character as much as they do in the season. And in particular, the relationship between Shane and Lem seems completely irreparable. Yeah. I was in the middle of this season thinking back on, they pretty much make up by next season, right? Like they're buddies again. Like, they're friends. And like, and when the Angie stuff's going on, I'm like, I can't remember how they pulled that off. And I'm not sure that I'm going to buy it this time around. And yet just the sheer force of Goggins acting in that episode. Yeah. He sells that confession scene with, it's not really he's confessing to the strike team and taking like ownership and remorse and offering to, in this clumsy, way that won't really bring Angie any justice, but he makes this he's all of a sudden Shane Vendrell makes this totally selfless offer to try and salvage what he can for the rest of them. And Goggins actually sells that. In a way. He sold me on it and sold Lem on it. And then you follow that scene up with him going in there and just hurling slurs at Anthony Anderson. They're so
oh my god.
It's still the Shield. He's still Shane. He finds that's his way of doing good is still going to involve all that.
He finds a form of grace and then reminds you exactly who he is. It's incredible.
When he tells Antoine that his son's going to end up with a back full of shiv and an ass full of something else, it's like, oh my, my god, this is poetry. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Glenn Close is telling the same thing. It's not really any better what she's doing, like the way she's using that.
Oh,
she's just not using the naughty words.
Yeah,
getting Close and Anderson, these big scenes together in that episode also really works. Like, I mean, we talk about season of guest stars here. If they're going to be this good and they're this good together, then it's fine. I don't mind if you want to give me a scene of these two going at it. That's just as good. I'm into it. And that episode is just nothing but those scenes. It's just everyone gets a big ass scene with Anthony Anderson, and it's wonderful. It's all the things you want in this show. Best it gets, at least so far.
And then there's a couple more episodes that I feel like were probably my first time through. Like I feel like, okay, this is a letdown. I came out this season thinking it was not as good for the reasons I was saying earlier. And yet on a rewatch, it's salvaged by knowing that these bombs actually aren't going to go off, and that Lem really is screwed. And going back, like we said I wanted a bigger exit for Michael Pena. I think they did a really good job, working with what they obviously had to work with. Suddenly he was not available for a longer appearance or even a more complete exit. It's very abrupt. And, but
no one has a more abrupt exit than Kavanaugh, but we'll get to that.
No,
later.
yeah, that's one of the definite things you iron out in this series. But I think they did with having to get rid of him quickly. They came up with a pretty good way of having that be a unique sort of challenge for the strike team. Is that and not that it's usually the challenge is, okay, how are we going to untie these 3 knots simultaneously while spinning 6 other plates on our noses and whatever. But in this case, it's just somebody, a fellow cop, refusing to go on, just saying, I'm just not going to dig any deeper. And the way it presents says like, oh yeah, I guess that maybe that is kind of an option for these guys. Like,
yeah, well,
but they just refuse to stop digging.
The only problem is like, they talk about like, you're fucking everybody if you don't take the lie detector test. Not really, turns out.
No, that's what I'm saying. That's the part that I think is salvaged by because he doesn't take the lie detector test that Rowling has the IAD guys stay on them, and he finds the heroin, which leads us to Kavanaugh, which leads us to everything else. And again, watching it through the first time, none of that's apparent to me. It seems like just okay, they're setting up another scrape with the strike team to slip out of. But knowing that they don't slip that noose does like help that character's exit to me in hindsight.
Well, it is such an intricate plot web, this show, like every little thing, like I mean, it's kind of remarkable to me that you hear like nary a mention of the money train this season, like maybe once or twice at the beginning it gets name dropped, maybe, but it's just gone. It's out of everyone's mind this year, and then so you might even forget it, but the show hasn't. And I think that letting those things kind of sit in the back burner and not get mentioned, it's very effective in the long run. Having some time where you think the show might have moved on with this soft reset, only to come back and be like, no, all that stuff matters. Structurally, I think that's great. That's really important and part of why it works so well.
And just that they don't feel the need to mention the name Terry Crowley every other episode.
Yeah.
And that, as you're going through the show the first time, could feel like, a weakness. But once you know that they definitely remembered all the way through and that's going to be a factor in the final episodes of the series, then it's like, okay, this is actual, it feels more like characterization. It is demonstrating and dramatizing how Vic Mackey operates, which is always swimming forward like the shark he is, never looking back. And, that in the final episodes, you get, somebody asking him like, how do you live with yourself? And his only response is like, I don't think about it. And that's part of the reason why he can't stop digging. Because if he stopped digging, he might just think about it. Which I guess, him and Ronnie have stopped digging for 8 months, they say, at the beginning of this season. And it didn't take him down, except that we skip over that part. So the parts that we're watching, which are the parts that matter to us, it feels true. Even if you could
you wonder what he was actually up to that time. I mean, keeping his nose clean, sure, but how much could he really do that?
Well, I feel one of the big questions that the moral questions that this season asks, and that we all have to kind of think about on our own is, should Billings have engaged those gang members at the car wash?
No, he would have got killed. He was actually like on Billings' side there. I don't think he could have done shit.
He's a man who knows his limitations. I don't know why it was. It's clear to me.
I mean, I think yes. I don't think he should have like run up and tried to stop him, but I think he should have yelled police and maybe fired his gun into the air. I would stay behind that wall, but he had a pretty and called it in. I don't think he should have run out and tried to stop him, but I think he had to do a little more than he did. That's my assessment.
He's a very wire character as well. Like just sort of, just not explicitly corrupt, just sort of institutional rot as a person. And that is a welcome. He ends up being he's the guy next season, right? He's the chief.
He's the captain. Yeah,
he's the spineless jellyfish they find.
I mean, he's actually the early parts of this season, he's kind of just presented as like a normal detective. It's like he's not, it's maybe it's
He's not a
after
villain,
the whole.
yeah.
It's after the whole car wash thing, and Dutch kind of does him a favor by not really looking into that any further, and then he's fucking with Dutch, and after all that, that's when we really start to see the true Billings.
Yeah, the thing that makes him unlikable and a villain to me is not when his cowardice at the car wash. It's that after Dutch covers for him, he still just continues piling
he's
on
fucking with his chair
with everybody else. Like that is somehow more cowardly, I mean, to me, than letting the citizen get shot. I don't know, that's the reason why I don't judge him too harshly. I think the guy was already dead by the gunshots had already been fired.
Yeah, once the gun goes off, point blank range, there's not much he can do other than maybe get killed himself, because he's not taking those guys down. I don't know. I'm also giving Billings a pass here.
No, but not socially for continuing to bully Dutch. That's
where
he gets no pass from me.
Dutch, a good season, I think, for Dutch. I think, as much of a creep as he is, this is the kind of Dutch I like, I think. Blowing dates with the Hungry Like a Wolf scene, which sets up the dash cam. So that's good storytelling. And I think the stuff with him and Claudette is really well acted. I think it's a little obvious in how it's written, but they pull it off. I like, the entire Dutch Claudette relationship. I mean, Sean Ryan called it a non-sexual romance, which that's what it feels like this season to me. Like it finally gets where they want it to be, I think, this year. And and they're good together. They are. They're just interesting actors. And I love all this stuff with Billings, all this stuff with well, I don't know about the Corinne stuff. Rough year for Corinne, huh?
Yeah.
Anti-vax and
rough series Dutch. For Corinne, really.
Yeah. Rough 7 seasons.
I actually think that I think it's actually a pretty good performance. It's just such a thankless role.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But also kind of essential. Like it's not a role that I, in the redrafting of it that you write out of the show. You need it in there. But it's hard to come up with anything.
She's actually great, I think. She does a terrific job. I mean, it is. I think that they really sort of hand wave the Dutch Corinne relationship. They don't show us a lot of scenes of them together until it's like over, and they can do a little bit more traditional kind of like Dutch being low status, getting yelled at shit.
It's not so much that I want to see a ton more of those scenes, but it does feel like we've yada-yada a lot to the point where like they're very serious all of a sudden. When I feel like, wait, haven't you guys been dating for like 3 weeks? And now like he's reading kids their bedtime stories, and they're like, she's very much, I don't know. Yeah.
It is a big move too to date Vic's ex. It seems like maybe even a bigger deal than the show presents it as.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, that could have used a little more just to sell it, honestly.
In a way, Vic inviting Dutch out to the big, bar gathering in the season finale feels like mending that relationship in that minor way feels like a bigger stretch than Lem and Shane getting back together.
Yeah, in many ways, that's true.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess it's just that Vic has so much other shit going on. I don't know. I mean, the power of Carl and Scoopy's death, of course.
Yeah. One I can buy too, that it actually kind of clarified for him that, you know what, I'm not actually like, it's not like he wants his ex back at this point. And I think maybe that clarified for him, like, oh yeah, like I'm trying to maintain my family as an idea and like I wish it with my kids, but it's not about getting back together with her and having Dutch in there, I think clarifies that for him.
I love during the Dutch Billings fight when Vic goes to break it up, and then Dutch is like, "No, come on, Vic, you and me now, come on!" And then just the look on Vic's face, and it's that's a great moment. I love that. And then of course, Claudette has to stop everything and remind everyone about Carl and Scooby, and then they all disperse.
That could have been the Always Sunny line delivery too. So like if you wanted to do 2 of our own are dead, but yelling about the DA is actually so much more perfect because it's the same pitch of the performance, and yet it's more obviously directed towards like Picayune plot bullshit that you don't remember afterwards. What exactly the errand for the DA is. Whereas two of our own are dead, you probably remember what scene that's from.
Yeah, it's I mean, yeah, for like I just as a sidebar, it really can't be said spoken highly enough. The Glenn Howerton CCH Pounder impersonation from It's Always Sunny. It's one of my favorite things they did. Honestly, I'm that taken by it because it was so unexpected that he would whip out a Claudette Wims impersonation, and a perfect one.
It's great. Yeah. Like Community was great at that too. Is cultural references that are that specific and that nobody's made before. You're like, if somebody asked you to do a Claudette Wims impression, like you wouldn't be able to whip it out, even like being a Shield fan right away. And then they find the perfect line to be like, right. That's it. That's the thing. That's what we remember. Even if it's like, it's such a perfectly representative line. It's like, it's representative of the parts, the Claudette Dutch storylines that we don't remember, but it's perfectly evocative of, oh yeah, that stuff that they're also dealing with while all the really interesting stuff's going on.
Right. Yeah, it suggests that Dennis is a huge Shield fan, and they all are, which is funny too.
Well, I buy that they're all Shield fans. I think it's funny that he's a Claudette fan. Like that's what the funny part to me. I think there's some stuff at the beginning of the season that we kind of blew right past that I want to at least mention. Just how well I love how they deploy the sort of reboot with Shane as now the villain. The parts where the strike team is separated and a maneuver and even Lem is still tied in. Like, for as much as this is a reboot and walking back some of the corruption from the strike team, it still hangs over them because the reason why Lem can't just walk away from this is we have to protect Shane from himself, because if he goes down, his only card to play will be telling them about stuff we've already done with them. So they're tied. Yeah. They're stuck with him no matter what, even though they're actually apart from him and they can't control even how far he's going. And the way that he enters the final scene of the premiere, just such a perfect deployment, the reveal of that dash cam and the turn that takes with like, we're not about protecting Shane anymore. We got to stop him, except they do still have to protect him from himself. What a great setup.
Oh yeah. Like, and none of this would work nearly as well if Goggins wasn't so keyed in. Like they have complete faith in him at this point in the writing room to just throw whatever they need to, and he will sell it. He will pull it off. And he does this so incredible. Like the first 5 episodes of this season where he is just, he's acting like a stupid asshole. I mean, I guess, which is something we know later, but he's treating Antoine Mitchell like he is small time and that he is his bitch. And seeing that get shut down in episode 5, I believe, one of the great turns. And it also is basically what makes Antoine Mitchell who he is for the rest of the series. Just that huge scene that basically, well, it's a reset within the reset in a way. It just changes the entire trajectory of the season. It's so good.
And it's one of those scenes that just you remember so clearly because then you go on to see it in 17 different previously on.
Oh yeah, it's doing time for a long, long time. Absolutely.
Outside of Crowley getting killed and Aceveda's mouth rape, I think the mouth has got to be the number 3 on the most used on the previously reels.
Well, it's you ever suck a dick like a Sal bitch is with Aceveda. That's the one. Antoine telling him about sucking his dick and licking his balls or whatever. That's the one. And then
Daddy,
that tearfully,
Daddy,
shot a cop.
Oh yeah,
yeah. Oh, that's number 1. I mean, that has the advantage because it was in the first episode, but that's the number 1 for sure.
First episode, and it's like 1 second long. It's a single line.
Oh, you need to remember they shot a cop is the thing.
Yeah. Well, it's a good way to get people who haven't seen the show like, oh my god, these guys shot a cop. These guys are cops. We got to watch.
Well, so we're talking so much about Goggins and how great he is because he is, and that the scene we talked about earlier, his redemption scene, is the big Emmy reel, for your consideration scene. But he is so good in those first 5 episodes. Like you were saying, John, when he's off on his own, and he's trying to do kind of his Vic Mackey impression.
He sure is,
and not really selling it, and not like he has to go to like, and he'll do the thing where he suddenly pulls his gun on the underling or suddenly beats him up, but he has to go to that well too frequently. And Army kind of recognizes that, even though he hasn't seen, like, he doesn't have the contrast we do of seeing Vic Mackey operate. And
he's trying to little brother Army too. He's trying to, or big brother him. He's just like, no.
That's
I know what
more
I'm
of a Vic impression.
Yeah. There's one point
he's trying to treat Army like he thinks Vic treats him.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, there's one point where Army kind of calls him on his bullshit because I don't know, Shane says something like, oh, I know how to handle this, and then Army's like, oh, you mean you've seen Vic handle this?
Yeah, I know how to, or I've handled this before. He's like, you have or Vic has.
Exactly.
But yeah, just those scenes of Goggins trying to keep control and trying to project to Army that he's in control and like knows what he's doing, and also trying to protect, and how he's not, like, the modulation there of not quite selling it to himself, but also not quite selling it to Army on a different level. He's not selling it to himself and not quite selling it to the one-niners on a different level than that. And the amount of like the mixture of suppressed panic and cockiness.
I can't.
Because like he does the thing that, like, he pulls the gun, causes the big scene, caused a big problem. It was too much, too far. But as soon as they walk away, he starts convincing himself like, yeah, I pulled that off, right? Right? Probably. Yeah. Yeah, it's gonna be fine.
Yeah, this is as good as I've ever seen him. I mean, like, I'm really, really struck by. I mean, Walton Goggins plays bad guys for the most part. I don't know if I've ever seen Walton Goggins play what I would call a good guy in anything. But
you don't think Baby Billy is the hero of Righteous Gemstones?
He's like the nicest character he's ever played, is Baby Billy.
Yeah, probably.
And he's still one of the worst.
But is least violent, I guess.
Yeah, but like. I generally kind of love him, you kind of love Boyd Crowder. You kind of love even his character on Vice Principals. You certainly love him in Hateful Eight for some reason, but like he's...
Oh, no, the whole thing of Boyd Crowder is that the writing staff completely fell in love with him.
Right, yeah.
And had to sort of like do a figure eight and like backtrack to like...
Right.
I guess he's got to be the final villain of the final season, so we have to make him a villain again. We make him too much of a hero. I mean, he was supposed to be killed in the first episode, is the first thing it justified, and they like it. He's just too goddamn good.
Well, that's leaning into Walton Goggins' obvious
what
charisma,
you're talking
about. Whereas the Shield, I do not like Shane Vendrell. Shane Vendrell sucks. He is an asshole. It is still an incredible villain performance, but it is a very different tone that I'm almost surprised he has, considering how just inherently interesting an actor he is, that he can just be such a piece of shit. Which I guess shouldn't be a surprise. He's always a bad guy, but like.
No, 1,000% what you're saying though is that you never fall in love with Shane the character. You never like Shane the character, and yet the show is better the more he is in it.
Mm-hmm. Well, he's the villain. He's the villain of the Shield, such as it is. I mean, he's obviously also... Vic is, but like he's the antagonist of the Shield.
Well, he names his son after Stonewall Jackson.
Yeah, for real.
Like, I wonder if he sees the script for that, and he's like, "Come on, guys, are we not? We're a little on the nose here. I'm naming my son after Stonewall Jackson. Come on."
Well, it's one of those things that it's like what. Well, the part I don't buy about it is not that the character Shane wouldn't do that. It's that Vic seems to be setting him up with a suggestion of, as in Michael Jackson. Like that doesn't feel like a Vic Mackey joke or something else. So it's one of those things where it's like, why are you engaging this guy when he asks you if you want to talk about apples? It's clearly just setting up a line. Anyway, but the thing that's so great about the dynamic of the strike team and what the Shane thing allows is, this is what I love about the Shield more than anything. I think it does this dynamic that I love better than any other movie or show I can think of, which is, I think of the strike team as like a star. Now, in astronomical terms, the star is this giant roiling ball of fire that's a series of nuclear explosions that would blow completely apart. The force of nuclear explosions would blow the thing completely apart, except there's enough gravity pushing on it from the outside that it holds it kind of together into a continuously exploding ball of fire. And the strike team are are a group of people that hate each other so much, have so much internal conflict that they would blow themselves apart in this massive explosion if they are not under just enough external pressure all the time to force them to keep working together and just keeping things going and rolling. And like when the Sons of Anarchy is at its best, it managed that dynamic amongst its people too. I mean, John, you've read scripts that I have written trying to recreate that dynamic in different contexts, and nobody's ever done it better than the Strike Team on the Shield.
Yeah, I think that's well said. That is what they're great at here. Just the continuous applied pressure. I mean, it sometimes just feels like uncut gems. You know, it's that sort of just like, oh God, another thing. I mean, more
that's
so
as
as it goes on.
Singular individual, like doing this with a group dynamic is what's so it makes it that much more exciting and complicated to me.
And even Ronnie somehow is a contributory part of this. Like, it is still shocking to me how they just hold back on him. Like, they just refuse to really fill in Ronnie at all 4 seasons in.
He's not even in the initial cast credits yet this season. He's
number
like
one.
The guest, yes, but it's, I mean, come on. I mean, geez Louise.
I think we should put a pin in that. We are definitely going to talk about Ronnie in later seasons. We're over an hour here now. This is not a Ronnie season. I've got plenty of thoughts. I actually really like the performance.
He's great.
He's awesome.
Great.
Yeah.
My thought on that is the whole thing I've been saying about how all the ways you'd correct this in hindsight, even more than like giving Kavanaugh a more proper exit. I think the one change you make to this show that elder for me is I think Ronnie should be like 3 characters. Like the Strike Team.
Okay, we'll have to get back into that, man. I'm curious to hear how that. I
think the Strike Team should be a larger unit.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, see, in the final season, especially, I think if there is more of a team that is still intact there, and it's not just Vic and Ronnie, whose relationship is not that personal, I think it helps some things there. Maybe it also gives you an extra body or 2 to drop along the way. I don't know, but I think they're ultimately a little hindered in the last season because they.
I like Ronnie the Ghost. I like not.
We'll get to that
Ronnie,
when we get to it.
Yeah,
I mean, we'll talk about that.
That's why he could be 3 different guys. He could be 3 different guys, and one of them's the tech guy, and one of them's the quiet one who's actually the scariest.
He's also the
smartest
out of all of them.
Yeah, emotionally blank.
That is Ronnie. He's the scary, quiet one. Okay. Before we head off, what we're doing, the who's the worst person in Farmington this season?
Oh,
it's tough.
I'm going eat chalk. I'm going with Antoine. I mean, that'll be my vote.
Yeah, I mean, do we just like eliminate all of the child rapists from convention every season?
I mean, the stay-at-home rapist is pretty bad.
They're so thick on the ground. Yeah, that's probably the one.
Cleavon, I guess not this season. Yeah, but
even more than Antoine, Cleavon is not involved enough yet. Even with Antoine Mitchell, I'm like, except that I think he's kind of right about the asset Caesar 4 program. So, I mean, not kind of. I think he's entirely right. He's for the wrong. I mean, he's self-interested. His points are all correct
to rile people up. Yeah, it actually helps him, if anything. But I don't know though. I think Shane is giving him a run for his money, but like we said, he finds that moment. Yeah. Exactly. So I guess it's got to be Antoine. I guess it's got to be Antoine Mitchell.
Oh no, the stay-at-home rapist. Yeah, if the stay-at-home rapist is a contender,
he's pretty bad.
Sure. Even though we never get an actual scene.
No, I don't think we actually see him. We just hear him screaming in a closet as a dog rips his genitals off. Great scene, by the way. Kind of the show in a nutshell, right? Like, are you comfortable with this being done against this guy? It's yeah, good stuff. Okay, who's the best person then?
Army refuses. Stops digging.
Interesting.
I mean, look, obviously, the real answer is going to be Claudette every year, but
this is not Claudette's year to be the nicest, though. I don't.
No.
She doesn't do anything wrong.
No, not really. But she doesn't do anything particularly right either, other than just regular cop stuff. I think Monica Rowling is a contender, at least within the cosmology of the show.
I mean,
I know.
Cosmetic show maybe, but I think her initiative is. I think she sincerely believes in it, but it's so wrongheaded that I can't get behind.
That's the thing.
I think she's doing as much damage as Antoine Mitchell is, even if she's didn't kill anybody.
Yeah, okay, it's still Claudette.
I think for this season, I'm going to say Vic for just this season.
The argument could be made.
As good as he gets.
For
The
just
argument
this
could be made.
season.
When he breaks
As
the
morally
law,
good
there
as
is
he gets.
purpose and logic to it. You know?
Yeah.
And he's protecting people, and he's even, he's making up with Dutch. He's offering an olive branch there.
Yeah, and this is about as creepy as Dutch gets. I don't know. The cat was pretty creepy. Dutch gets
that was pretty creepy.
That's yeah.
Well, this is when Vic would be most justified in harassing Dutch,
right,
and really going after him. Instead, he offers him an olive branch. So that's as nice as Vic gets.
Wow. Well, savor that moment for Vic, because that's over with season 5. Kind of when the show really, really jumps to the next level. I think everyone would agree. This is season 5 with Forrest Whitaker, which will be the next time we talk about The Shield. That's next up, and if not the best season of the show, certainly in contention. And I am very, very excited to revisit it and see what I remember and what I forgot.
Yeah, this is a leveling up for the show.
Mm-hmm.
It's putting it in a different echelon.
Yeah, I mean,
drama. That's the season that does it.
I mean, is it as good as anything you'd want to point to? This is where it becomes, something you can talk about in the same breath as Sopranos, Deadwood, The Shield, all the big HBO shows at the time. This is where it comes together. So if you haven't seen that and you've been following us along, do not wait. Otherwise, we'll just talk about it anyway. And I don't know, anything else? Rate and review on the podcast app of your choice. That helps the show. The usual thing that people say at the end of podcasts. And I believe that'll be it for The Shield season 4. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
God, our endings are so lame. I got to figure out how to end a podcast. Okay. Should have figured it out by now.
I thought we would have stumbled on it by now.
Nope.